complaint against Marcoleta and 3 others. The case recommendation stemmed from a previous case last year at the Commission on Elections, where the senator was investigated for non-disclosure of the donation in his statement of contributions and expenditures. The COMELEC, however, did not recommend any charges against the former chairman of the powerful Senate Blue Ribbon Committee, as such non-disclosure is no longer considered an election offense. But Ombudsman prosecutor said Marcoleta unjustly enriched himself by accepting the 75 million peso gift. Marcoleta himself had stated in interviews that he did receive the amount in campaign donations. At the time the campaign kitty was donated, Marcoleta was a representative of the Social Amelioration and Genuine Intervention on Poverty or SAGIP party list.
Senator Marcoleta, definitely, for the solution na. We're about to file it already. Because ang bayan ng kaso na, sa Sandigan na yan. Plunder.
Remulla said that aside from Marcoleta, others who will be facing the same case are former lawmaker Mike Defensor and businessman Joseph Varias Espirito and Aristotel Baluyot Viray. They all have yet to issue their response to the Ombudsman's announcement. But Marcoleta in previous Senate sessions and in his own counter-affidavit had dismissed the complaint as trumped-up charges meant to silence him. The Sandigan Bayan on May 26 already issued a precautionary hold departure order against Marcoleta, Defensor, Espirito, and Viray. And then, there are other senators facing complaints before the Ombudsman, Chis Escudero and Joel Villanueva. This time, it's over their supposed involvement in anomalous and state-funded infrastructure projects. According to Remulla, the cases against the two are still under investigation.
Hindi namin tinanggap yung findings ng DOJ kasi nakulangan kami sa case build-up na ginawa ng DOJ, so we had to conduct our own. And in case we have to improve on the cases to make sure that they're tight cases, watertight cases.
Remulla also firmly denied claims that Villanueva and Escudero joined the new Senate majority in exchange for the dismissal of their cases.
I'm not privy to anything of that nature. No, mind you, we don't make deals with anybody with regards to the culpability or innocence of anybody. We don't make deals with that.
And you're not going to be...
So all the deals that we make here will be in open court. If you'll discharge you as a witness, we will have you discharged as a witness. But there are no other deals accepted here.
But if there's one who may just evade charges over the flood control scandal, that's Manuel Bonoan. Remulla said they are looking at making the former Public Works Secretary a state witness, citing the importance of his testimony against flood scam perpetrators. The Ombudsman will ask the Sandigan Bayan to discharge Bonoan as a respondent.
Meron na kaming standing agreement. We filed already a motion to discharge him as an accused so that he can be a witness for the prosecution. The knowledge that he has about the whole institution is something very important to us to be able to prove many cases. There are other people who will be, we will be benefiting from his testimony with regards to so many of the cases that we are filing.
Bonoan was initially charged with plunder, alongside Senator Jinggoy Estrada and several DPWH officials in connection with flood control kickback. He was arrested on June 1st for a non-bailable plunder case. The anti-graft court later allowed Bonoan's motion for house arrest due to his advanced age and life-threatening medical conditions.
His health is of concern to us, and we want to be able to perpetuate his testimony as soon as possible.
Kapatid Mobile journalist Mary Monreyes, we are One News.
The pre-trial order for the impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte has been released. This is according to Attorney Ray Bantug Jr., Senate Secretary and Clerk of Court. The pre-trial order will serve as a legally binding roadmap. It defines specific boundaries as to admitted facts, disputed issues, marked evidence, witness lists, and trial timeline. Both the prosecution panel and the VP's defense team will have 3 days or until July 2 Thursday to submit their formal comments and feedback. Meanwhile, the camp of Vice President Duterte has agreed to open the box containing her records with the Bureau of Internal Revenue. The so-called green box also has tax documents of Duterte's husband, Attorney Mans Carpio. But the defense has conditions. The item should be unsealed in an executive session and that its contents must remain confidential. But House Prosecutor and ML Party List Representative Laila De Lima rejected these conditions.
This is a superior constitutional mandate at malaman talaga ang katotohanan, ano yung mga, at maipoprove ng prosecution ano yung importance or significance ng mga tax records na yan in relation to the issue of unexplained wealth.
The House prosecution team has also added more private prosecutors to its roster, which now stands at 15. Included in this new batch are Attorney Ted Te, the interim chairperson of the Free Legal Assistance Group, Attorneys Reynaldo Robles and Arnold Labay, and Attorney May Divina Gracia. Divina Gracia previously served as legal counsel for the late DPWH Undersecretary Maria Catalina Cabral, while Robles represented former Senator Sonny Trillanes, who is expected to testify in the impeachment trial.
Madami pa rin pong trabaho na kailangan gawin kasi kailangan mag-background checks, kailangan mag-i-review lahat ng dokumento, kailangan i-prepare yung witnesses or yung possible questions, no? I-research yung lahat ng pwedeng i-research. No? So, hindi po madami yung 15 or 20.
In exactly 1 week, the historic impeachment trial begins. What can we expect? And weighing in is University of the Philippines College of Law Assistant Professor Mike Chu. Good evening, attorney, and welcome to The Big Story.
Good evening, Ses, and to all the viewers of The Big Story.
Let's begin with the voting threshold in the Senate. The Ombudsman has just announced that 3 more senators with 1 going to face charges in a few days. How should the voting threshold be adjusted, or should it?
So, in my view, Ses, the voting threshold should not be adjusted. The Constitution is quite clear that conviction requires 2/3 of all the members of the Senate, and it doesn't qualify the status of that member as long as they remain members and they are counted in the base.
There are some of the view, who present a contrary view because some senators may be beyond the coercive jurisdiction of the Senate. What do you think of the contrary point of view?
So that coercive jurisdiction doctrine, or let's say view, stems from the Avellino case, which is a case on the matter of quorum to do business in the Senate, pertaining mostly to their legislative functions. And so the reasoning there applies in particular to quorum, and the language of the constitutional provision on the quorum and the composition of each house, including the Senate, is different from the language of the vote that is required to convict an impeachable officer. And in the latter case, it's quite clear.
So one pertains to legislative functions, while the matter of needing all, or 2/3 of all, applies to their role as impeachment officers of the court.
That's right. The quorum question and the contrary view as to the coercive power may still apply with respect to whether there is a quorum on the part of the senator judges. So for counting purposes, how many should be present in the room, for example, to hold the trial at all. But the question of how many votes should be in the affirmative to convict is a separate question from the quorum question.
All right. Now, on the matter of when this voting threshold should be determined, should it be immediately upon the opening of the impeachment court?
Yes, I would think that for clarity purposes, because if to prevent everything to become for naught, right? Because it might be raised again at the end of the trial, the Senate, as acting as an impeachment court, should settle that question right at the beginning of the trial. Of course, that's without prejudice to how the Supreme Court, if it gets raised to the Supreme Court, might rule on the question, because they are the final arbiters on what the Constitution says and means. But the Senate itself, as an organ of government, has the power at the first instance to make a determination on that question.
Well, if it is challenged before or brought to the Supreme Court, would it scuttle the proceedings? Would the proceedings be put on hold until the Supreme Court rules?
I wouldn't think so. Of course, the impeachment court may take a different direction, but the Constitution says that the trial should proceed forthwith once the articles are already before the court. So, what the Senate can do, and it is, of course, practicable, is to proceed with the trial even when the question of the voting threshold remains open, and will cross the bridge when they get there, which is when it's time for voting and everybody has have presented their cases, and therefore they can wait, for example, for the Supreme Court to settle the question. That might mean an extension of a waiting period, but the trial need not stop.
The prosecution's strategy is to present the kill threat first, as its first article. What do you think of that strategy?
I think in terms of the weight of the allegations, I don't think that is the strongest among the articles of impeachment. I think the strongest would be with respect to the public funds or confidential funds. But I can understand the strategy because this one article on the threat was a visible one. It was watched by a lot of the members of the Filipino people, and also is a bit more understandable, comprehensible on the part of the public. It's talking about behavior, it's talking about fitness that a lot of people can judge for themselves as well. Because they all saw the video and I heard what was said there. So I think as a matter of establishing, let's say, character on the part of the vice president, this is material, and I can understand why they would lead with that.
But what is your view as to the strength of each article of impeachment or each charge that will be presented by the prosecution? Some have said that each one should be standalone, should be strong, and they should not rely on other articles to present their case or to I would say, to seal the case.
I agree with that view that each article of impeachment should be strong on its own, particularly because the voting will also be on each article of impeachment. And so, if enough votes to convict are already garnered for one article, they don't even need to vote on all the other articles at that point. So I think it should be independent of each other, although there might be a relation between Articles 1 and 2 relating to the amassing of public of wealth and in relation to the use of confidential funds. And we have yet to see how that might be connected. But I think in terms of the strength, and we're talking here about the grounds for impeachment, including graft and corruption, betrayal of public trust, Article 3 for me, while also a ground in and of itself as the way it's framed by the prosecution, is less strong than the first two. We've had uncouth presidents, just to say that we've had presidents whose behavior are in kind of in this genre, so to speak. But the matter of the use of public funds is a clear betrayal. If it was used inappropriately and for personal gain, that speaks to the fitness of the person to remain in office. And of course, the big question of accountability for that misuse.
Now, Prof, the strategy of calling Mary Grace Piatos as a witness, by the prosecution, what do you make of it? Because isn't there contention she doesn't exist?
Yes, I think that might be the point, part of the point that they're trying to make, that if a subpoena is issued for one Mary Grace Piatos and nobody appears because the person does not exist, or that person who actually received the funds who is a different person and is not named Mary Grace Piatos, then it proves the point that it was manufactured, that the documentation was fabricated.
Shouldn't the defense have volunteered to present her and listed her as one of their witnesses?
They should have, but of course, it's an impossibility if that person does not exist. What I hear from the defense is they will cross-examine at the time when the witness is presented. But again, that begs the question of whether the witness will be presented at all. So it's kind of a play on the strategy of the prosecution. They're going to react to what the prosecution will do while keeping their cards close to their chest and also being safe about the language that they're using.
Or they could present a person who they say has the alias of Piatos, right?
They could present that, but it still will have to answer the question of, well, why was this person a recipient of confidential funds, and why the need for an alias? I can imagine. Well, we don't want to preempt what the defense might say, but one can think of an approach that says, well, if they're trying to protect identity, they're going to use aliases, but it still doesn't answer the question of, well, did this transfer of money have something to do with national security? Because that is how what you can use confidential funds for and nothing more.
Well, earlier we had the story on the opening of the tax returns. And the condition given by the defense is they agreed, but the condition is to open it in executive session and not to disclose it to the public. But isn't an impeachment trial supposed to be a public trial?
You're correct, Seth, and I think that permeates the strategy of the defense from start to finish in their answer and in their public comments to date, which is due process, confidentiality, and it's this strategy of over proceduralizing an impeachment trial when it's both a legal and a political proceeding, and more importantly, it is done in the interest of the public. And so transparency is a key element of a legitimate proceeding such as this one, particularly the political part of this, political meaning in the interest of the public by leaders elected in political positions. That's why senator judges are the judges in this trial. And so I think that it should be out in the open, particularly because we are talking here in relation to the vice president of public funds, the salary of a public official. If the concern is the income, or let's say the funds or details relating to the spouse of the vice president, it's not an all or nothing situation. It can be out in the open with redactions. They can present evidence with certain parts of it being confidential. That's not unheard of.
When it pertains to the husband.
Correct. But even then, there's still a legitimate question of commingling of funds. And really, I think the weightier interest here is the interest of the public versus the interest of a public official.
Should the VP attend this trial?
Well, it depends on who you would ask. If you're asking as a citizen and as a person who is interested in accountability, she should attend this trial. One, also because it will give the Filipino public confidence that she is herself confident to face the allegations against her, especially in light of the fact that she's also seeking the highest office of the country in the next election. So that's certainly an imperative on the part of the vice president. But if we ask the vice president or maybe someone in her team, she doesn't need to attend. I don't think that support for the vice president from her base will largely change because of this trial. And it also will provide material for whoever might be watching, catching her reactions to statements of witnesses, catching her at a weak moment, to create a narrative out of her attendance. So there are certainly considerations for not attending, but I think, again, on the whole, she should attend because this is a matter of her fitness to be in office. And at the very least, her attendance should signal some confidence that she does not hide anything from the Filipino people.
I'd like to do a follow-up on two questions I raised earlier. First, the tax returns. So the defense would have to relent in the interest of, transparency to
That's
open
right.
the tax records in public.
Yes, I think that's the heavier interest here, especially because her income also includes precisely, as Article 2 alleges, her salary, her pay as a public official, and whether that is disproportionate to what has been declared or what we'll discover in those tax returns.
Also, she could do it before the impeachment trial begins, right? If she has nothing to hide, you can
Yes,
make it public.
I think, yeah, she could also do it. And I think they are just trying to, I think it's just delaying the inevitable, although I say that with the hope that the impeachment court might rule to open the box. And I think the defense already did with conditions. But she could do that, but she's not doing it because why help the prosecution? I think is the question.
All right. Now, going back to the voting threshold, Senator Bato de la Rosa is on the run, and Senator Jinggoy Estrada has already been suspended by the Sandigan Bayan itself. So
That's correct. And
will we count them? Should we still count them? And if Senator Marcoleta is arrested as well and jailed for plunder, because this is a non-bailable case as well, do we include him too?
Yes, I think so. I think we should include all members of the Senate who remain members of the Senate because that is what the Constitution says. Now, of course, I think that the issue might be more apparent than real because you still have enough senators on the floor. There would be, without the three, there would still be 21. Enough number where you could get 16 to get the 2/3 concurring vote to convict. And so there'd still be enough senators on the floor.
Once again, we apply that the coercive jurisdiction only applies to legislative matters and to quorum, but not
That's right.
to the Senate impeachment, Senate acting as an impeachment court.
Right. I think the purpose of the coercive power from Avellino says is, the work of the Senate cannot be hampered by persons who obstruct by absenting themselves from Senate sessions. And so the coercive power of the Senate stems from the power to arrest or to take or to seize the persons of the senators so that they attend session and they get to do work as a legislative body. And even for the purposes of the trial to have enough senators on the floor. But to that extent only. So the question really does not pertain to whether they could vote or they should vote because the Constitution does say all its members.
For Senator Coco Pimentel, he says if they're still being called in the roll call, then that means they should be counted.
That's right.
Well, we thank you so much for your insights, Attorney Mike Chu of the UP College of Law. Meantime, here are tonight's global headlines from Mobile Journal Fatima Baduria.
Iran and the United States have reportedly agreed to halt recent hostilities and resume diplomatic talks over the Strait of Hormuz. According to a report by U.S. media outlet Axios, officials from both sides are expected to meet in Qatar on Tuesday to discuss the dispute, which is a violation of the June 17 interim ceasefire. The White House has yet to comment on the matter. Over the weekend, Iran launched drone and missile attacks on Bahrain and Kuwait. These were a response to new U.S. airstrikes that hit the Islamic Republic. In Europe, an unprecedented record-smashing heat wave is baking large parts of the region. Over 1,000 people have died amid historic temperature highs there. Reports indicate an intense atmospheric heat dome is trapping scorching air from northern Africa, pushing temperatures past 41 degrees Celsius. All-time records have been shattered in Austria, Germany, the Czech Republic, and Poland. In France, public health officials have confirmed excess deaths, as landmarks like the Louvre cut operating hours with the oppressive heat built up inside the centuries-old structure. Climate scientists warn this intensity would be virtually impossible without global warming, as major shipping veins like the Rhine River quickly dry up. The World Health Organization has warned that Europe is now the fastest warming continent and needs to do more to protect its citizens. And in Venezuela, local and international rescue teams are racing against the clock to find survivors. That's after two powerful earthquakes struck the northern state of La Guaira on June 25. According to National Assembly President George Rodriguez, the death toll has climbed to at least 1,500. More than 3,100 people were injured and hundreds of buildings destroyed. The magnitude 7.2 and 7.5 quakes hit just 39 seconds apart. More than 25,000 rescuers, along with international teams, continue search and recovery operations. The U.S. Geological Survey said the final death toll could exceed 10,000, making the disaster one of Latin America's deadliest in the last century. Kapatid Fatima Baduria, we are One News.
You're watching the big story on One News. When we return, one mayor in Cebu has banned cell phones in schools.
Kasi naiiwan na talaga yung mga bata. Grade 6 students are reading grade 3 textbooks. It's very alarming already. Why? Because students are more focused on their cell phones. Students don't know how to read. They watch TikTok, they watch Facebook, they watch fake news.
Yung mga nagsasabi niya kung magkamukha kami, ito na. Oh,
ayan. Sa mga nagsasabi kung magkamukha kami.
Husgahan nyo na.
Para nga. Parang tama nga kayo.
MMDA General Manager Nicolas Torre III and internet personality Diwata there, they indulged netizens and met face-to-face to put to rest observations of their striking resemblance. So what do you think? I think they should change attire so that we can judge better. Now on to more stories. President Bongbong Marcos wants to beef up security in schools nationwide. That's following the Tacloban shooting, which had the PNP also tightening watch on learning institutions. Local governments are likewise pitching in, with one LGU going as far as banning cell phones in schools. The details from mobile journalist Jazz Paredes.
Another alleged stabbing and shooting spree, this time at the Batangas Integrated High School, which the Philippine National Police said was thwarted. It all started with a message on the school's Facebook page. An alleged grade 10 student claimed to have a plot against fellow students from grades 7 to 10. As a precautionary measure, the school suspended classes on June 29, Monday, the first day of the week. Yet, it also pleaded to learners, parents, and school personnel to remain calm, refrain from spreading unverified information, and to immediately report any suspicious messages, accounts, or activities. Policemen visited the school to conduct an assessment and have identified the minor who had made the threat. They referred the case to the Batangas City Social Welfare and Development Office. On Tuesday, June 30, classes will resume at the Batangas Integrated School. Then, there's Escalante National High School in Negros Occidental, which shifted to alternative delivery mode on Monday afternoon. That's because of a reported shooting threat that also spread through social media. Authorities are still investigating. Over in the town of Damanhug in Cebu, Mayor Gungun Ika totally banned all cell phones in public schools effective June 29. This will be confiscated and returned only when the school year ends. The move is an effort to avert any more violence in schools, supposed to be inspired by online platforms.
Kasi naiiwan na talaga yung mga bata. Grade 6 students are reading grade 3 textbooks. It's very alarming already. Why? Because students are more focused on their cell phones. Students don't know how to read. They watch TikTok, they watch Facebook, they watch fake news.
The palace is in favor of the measure but has a word of caution.
Maganda naman po yung kanyang layunin para po mas magkaroon ng concentration ang mga bata sa kanilang pag-aaral. Hindi ko lang po masasabi kung ang penalty ay nararapat, kung ito ba ay reasonable. Dahil ang makakapagpa-implement naman po nito ay ang mga eskwelahan.
Amid the onslaught of threats against schools, President Bongbong Marcos has called for tighter security in learning institutions.
Kailangan maprotektahan ang ating mga kabataan. Maprotektahan laban sa karahasan. Maprotektahan laban sa kapabayaan. Maprotektahan laban sa pangan. Maprotektahan laban sa mga tahimik at pinagdaraan at pasaning dinada ng marami sa kanila.
In response, the PNP says it will strive to be one with the public. One action plan, attend flag-raising ceremony.
Alam niyo naman po na hindi kami pwedeng basta-basta pumasok sa my school, especially when armed. But the presence of the police alone inside the schools will bring yung sense of security and safety sa ating mga kabataan. And we want to reassure the public that we are doing everything we can.
The police also appealed to parents to play a more active role in monitoring their children's activities on social media. Meantime, the National Parents and Teachers Association introduced 16 amendments to its current PTA guidelines. All are geared toward improving parents' stewardship of their children, especially since education should always begin at home. All are geared toward improving parents' stewardship of their children, especially since education should always begin at home.
Education begins at home, no? It takes a barangay to educate a child. And also, ang tawag po dito natin, hindi po kasalanan ng isang eskwelahan, ng teacher at ng kapulisan kung meron po mga pangyayaring ganyan. Ito po ay kasalanan ng ating mga magulang. We need to look out for our child. Narito po ang National PTA, no? Just type PTA in Facebook at makikita niyo po, mag-message po kayo sa National PTA o sa amin sa PTA, ay sasagot po kaagad yan at kami po ang magtatransmit sa DepEd Central Office.
Kapatid Jazz Paredes, R1 News.
In other news, the Budget Department has proposed We discussed this further with JC Punongbayan of the UP School of Economics. He's also the author of a new book called Twin Plagues: How Duterte and COVID-19 Wrecked the Philippine Economy, which we will talk about later. Now, welcome to the big story and in person this time.
Oh yes, it's a nice change. Thanks for having me, Ses.
First of all, wow, another record-breaking budget.
Yeah.
Can we afford it? The deficit will be larger for sure.
Yes, even before this was announced, Ses, the debt to GDP ratio has already been increasing. So it's now at 63%. Before the pandemic, it was less than 40%. So it's going up and up. So there are no indications that this is going down, especially with the massive spending of the Marcos administration. There's so many things we need to spend on, but there's not enough revenues coming in.
Right.
So we're forced really to borrow even more. So I'm afraid that we'll have to borrow a huge chunk of this new 7+ trillion peso budget next year.
But do budgets really have to increase annually?
Yes, it does
Yes.
increase about 10% from year to year. And that's to be expected because the Philippine economy is growing, the population is growing, there's more public goods that need to be spent on. But the problem is, how sustainable is this spending? So that's the big question.
Okay. Now, is this spending going to the right places? That is the question.
Well, all eyes are on the Budget Secretary, Kim De Leon, because he had promised...
A young one.
UP professor as well.
Right.
But I think we need to monitor very closely the budget preparation because it's a huge budget, 7+ trillion pesos, but will it be spent on the right things? Infrastructure, for example, we definitely need more of that. But I think I'm quite worried about the lacking investments in human capital, in particular, like education and health. And so this is a lingering problem. This is not a new problem. And I'm afraid that the incentive for politicians would be to put more pork as we go into 2028 in a few years.
Because it's going to be elections
Elections. And many studies have already shown that in the run-up to elections, spending on pork projects, both hard and soft, so hard would be roads, bridges, etc., and then soft ayuda projects really skyrocket in the run-up to elections.
Well, okay. Now, let's go to your book because it also traces how we got here. How
Exactly.
we now have, as you said, 63% to GDP debt to budget.
Debt to GDP ratio, yes.
Debt to GDP ratio, right. Now, your book is called Twin Plagues: How Duterte and COVID-19 Wrecked the Philippine Economy. You argued previously that the Duterte administration severely hollowed out the economic momentum that Pinoy, the 6 years of Pinoy, had painstakingly, it wasn't easy,
Yes. It was not,
reached and handed over to the next administration.
Yes, the momentum was already there. We used to enjoy a growth rate of more than 6% every year, every quarter. So now we're down to 2.8% in the first quarter of 2026. Not many people know, Says, that the Philippine economy right now is on a permanently lower path compared to the path that we would have enjoyed if the pandemic had not happened. So I traced this in the book. I explained painstakingly and with
Two
lots
plagues,
of... two plagues, essentially, intersecting with one another. So in other words, it's not just the pandemic, but also the quality of the governance in which the pandemic played out. So many other ASEAN economies, for example, they also have authoritarian regimes, but the authoritarian regime of Rodrigo Duterte led to an unprecedented erosion of our democratic institutions. And weak rule of law worsened. So this worsened also the effect of the pandemic on the economy.
Because prior to the pandemic hitting us, well, he already destroyed a lot of institutions.
Yes.
This was 2021, and he assumed office in 2016.
yes.
So the tentacles were already present.
Exactly.
Yes. In your book, let's leave the pandemic for a while. You talk about regulatory vendettas and how that severely damaged the economy. What did you mean? How did he use the regulatory bodies of government to exact vendettas on, I don't know, political enemies or businessmen who he accused of being oligarchs, etc.
Exactly. So, of course, one of the most striking examples would be the closure of ABS-CBN and how that hit the Lopez clan, etc. But apart from that, we have to remember that Duterte also railed against some of the other tycoons, for example, MVP and the Ayalas at one point.
Who were forced to sell their water utility.
Yes, so there was this
Or a
very...
portion of it.
Yes, so they were due to increase their water rates or tariffs. However, because Duterte was very populist, so he kind of railed against these oligarchs and threatened them with many things. And thankfully, the impact was not really severe as Duterte's rhetoric, but the impact would be greater uncertainty of doing business in the Philippine economy. You have to, going back to the Pinoy administration, one of the successes there was the steady inflow of foreign direct investments. But that was because of the huge boost in confidence, because the anti-corruption effort was quite credible.
But it also signals to business that you have to be close to the powers that be. You have to, be cozy with them.
Exactly.
So that was what his administration also signaled, right?
Exactly. And it's not the usual thing where, this happens all the time, even now with the Marcos administration, in past administrations as well. But the way Duterte spoke, he was very flagrant in his threats. For example, he threatens personalities, specific personalities. So this does not help to improve the image of the Philippines. And if you're an investor looking at where to invest in the region, you're more likely to invest in more stable countries where the rules are predictable, the laws are implemented well.
Right, fairly.
Yes, exactly.
There's a level playing field.
Exactly.
And so the economy has been on the decline since.
Yes, this is also one of the things that people forget, that even before the pandemic, growth was already quite weakening a bit, but not to the extent that going down to 4 or 3%.
Weakening because already you could see the president driving away investment.
Exactly.
Okay.
So when you look at the records of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the foreign direct investment inflow during the Pinoy times, it was really rising quite steadily, and then it plateaued, and then it went down even before the pandemic. So that's a very real indication that investors are not seeing the Philippines as a worthwhile place to invest in and going elsewhere.
But prior to the flood control scandal and prior to this war in the Middle East, we were supposed to be on somehow the recovery.
Yes. So we have recovered definitely in terms of going back to the growth rate or the level of GDP that we had before the pandemic.
Growth.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So there was a bounce back definitely. But the thing is, we have not gone back to the pre-pandemic levels of growth. As I said, it's 6%. Now we're down to 2.8%. Maybe we're lucky if we're going to see 5% this year. Remember, the Marcos administration promised maybe 6 to 8% at the start. Now we're down to maybe less than 5%. So it's a degradation of our growth potential. It's definitely slowing down, and we have to ask ourselves where this really came from.
JC, that is the story of the Philippines. We're almost like about to get on the boat, and then we miss the boat. Isn't it like a boom and bust kind of cycle? Like, for instance, when during Cory Aquino's presidency, there was also so much hope, but she was hit by so many coup attempts.
Coup attempts, yes.
Yeah, so that led to a disastrous economic performance. And then, who are the others?
We were lagging behind, actually, says, even as early as the 60s, 70s. We were kind of leading the pack back then.
Right.
We were quite prosperous.
My God, 60s?
Exactly.
That's like 6 decades ago pa.
Exactly. So we have lost our momentum. We used to be richer than Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia, but they have all overtaken us. And then now, most recently, it's Vietnam. So the trajectory of the Philippines is really quite slow. So the gains of the Pinoy administration administration were really quite admirable, and they really set the tone for the rest of the 21st century, supposedly. But what I wrote in the book is that momentum was lost, and we kind of wasted the gains that we're seeing during those times.
How can we recover? How can we regain that momentum? Only in 2028 when we get a new leader?
Well,
if we vote for the right leader.
So that puts all the pressure on 2028. We need to get this right, because even at this rate, Vietnam is already zooming past us, and maybe Lao PDR is not far behind us.
Really?
Exactly.
Lao will beat us?
There's a distinct possibility that they will overtake us as well. So we need to get 2028 right to make the necessary investments, to strengthen rule of law, bring back the credibility for democratic institutions, because there's so much at stake.
Is this what propelled you to write the book? What made you write this Twin Plagues?
Yes, it's 2020 success, and for many people, they don't like to think about the pandemic anymore. But I think that the Philippines, our society, needs a proper reckoning of what had happened, because the scars of the pandemic have really become permanent, and yet we don't seem to like to talk about it anymore.
It was very painful.
It was very painful, definitely, for all of us, not just in terms of the loss of economic activity, but the lives that were lost. But I think there are lessons to be learned from the pandemic episode, as well as the Duterte presidency in general.
Presidency.
Yes.
Those are the two plagues that hit the Philippines, you say in your book. Now, it's an economic book.
Yes.
So it's backed by data.
Exactly.
It's not sabi-sabi mo lang.
Yes, exactly.
These conclusions you made, like you're saying that democratic institutions, competent technocracy, and economic fundamentals are not enough if power is used or is it only in one, is authoritarian. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. And how is it backed by data?
Well,
I need my glasses when I read my notes. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yes, the book is really quite data intensive, but of course there's a difficulty in translating that, in making that palatable to many people.
That's why you thought of the two plagues.
Exactly. So you can think of them as weakening, or the immune system of the Philippines was really quite vulnerable to these twin plagues. But I think not just from the data, but also from the stories that unfolded during the pandemic, how the economic managers faced different crises during those 6 years. I think there's so many insights to be gained from that, apart from the data.
You talk about society's immune system, in quotation marks, versus authoritarianism. What is a society? What are the immune system of? What's in the immune system of a society to fight off authoritarianism?
Well, I think it boils down, to the quality of institutions, because
like civil society,
and also governance itself, the quality of governance. In the book,
dapat immune tayo pero weak. We are weak.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
So in other words, there are institutions, there are rules that govern our lives that should, for example, push back against bad policies or ill-thought policies.
Right.
However, when there's, I liken Duterte's rule as a plague or a disease in itself, where there were so many incentives to kind of lower the quality of governance throughout the bureaucracy, throughout the politics during that time. Because
Cite an example.
Well, the pandemic, when the pandemic struck, for example, everyone was at a loss on what to do. At one point, I remember that Duterte was even encouraging people to go out, and it was the summer season of 2020, if you remember. But many people, competent people, should have pushed back against these. So, but they were silenced essentially because they feared.
Afraid.
They were afraid. Exactly.
Everybody was afraid.
Exactly. And I think that fear is what crippled the Philippine economy eventually.
So, okay. Never, next time, be more courageous.
Be more courageous, and we need to put the...
Speak truth to power.
Exactly.
What you were about to say?
And also, I think we need to choose the right leaders. It's a cliche thing, But in terms of the impact on the economy, as economists, we were really quite shattered by what had happened, because this is the first pandemic, I think, in our lives that we experienced, and the impact on the Philippine economy was really quite severe. And hopefully, we don't go back
Go
to those.
through it again.
Go through it again. Yeah, this is not the last pandemic that we're going to experience, possibly. So we need to put the right institutions in place.
And the right leader.
Correct.
Now, one final question. When is the book going
Oh, yes.
to be launched? I was hoping to get a
Oh
copy.
yes, I was hoping as well to bring a signed copy.
Yeah.
So the book is actually going to be published in Singapore 2 days from now on June 30, but it will be available here in the Philippines August 14. There's a book launch at the UP School of Economics.
Wow.
But people can pre-order on Fully Booked right now.
Congratulations on
Thank you
this
so much.
endeavor, because really we need more people to write about the Philippines. And this one, as you said, we have not really made a reckoning of our experience in the pandemic. Even nga the drug war, wala pang reckoning.
Yeah, there's a chapter on the drug war, by the way, and its impact on the economy as well. Yeah, that's chapter 2, I think.
Looking forward to it. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Cess.
This will not be the first book for sure.
Oh,
Hindi pa nga nalolaunch, pinag-uusapan ng next.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
JC Punong Bayan there of the UP School of Economics. He's a professor there and author of Twin Plagues, How Duterte and COVID-19 Wrecked the Philippine Economy. This is a
We already have a signed agreement for the cooperation of former Secretary Manuel Bunoan to be a state witness, to be a cooperating witness. We will discharge him from. We will ask the court to discharge him as a respondent, so he can testify for us as a state witness.
Why we need him as a state witness?
The knowledge that he has about the whole institution is something very important to us to be able to prove many cases. It's Senator Marcoleta, definitely. For resolution na. We're about to file it already. Pagkasampayan ng kaso na, sa sandigan na yun. Plunder. Uminit na sa tag-init. Di ba? Sinabi ko sa inyo noon, iinit. At sa tag-init. At ngayon, uulan ng kaso.
student managers and ball